Ahn, Du, Hankirkensan, Tran, Rebecca, Claire, Daniel, Sandra, Harlow, Owen, Marlene, Robert, Gallagher, Nadine, Walt, Patricia, Cassidy, Elise, Gerald, Marcus, Whitfield, Nora, Theo, Joel, Bertie, Kevin, Vivian, Arthur, Miles, Lena, Calloway, Deanna, Patrick, Eleanor, Ivy, Grant, Eleanor, Ivy, Grant, Toi Sunani. I hats. No ta no. Hi ho hon to noveen dofi biz. Triai. No gay. My name is June Harker. And the worst thing my brother ever said to me happened 40 minutes after I walked through the door of a house that used to be mine, too. I had been gone for 3 years. Not traveling. Not finding myself in some charming, Instagram-worthy sense. I had been in Tulsa working double shifts at a regional hospital system as a surgical tech, living in a studio apartment the size of a generous closet, sending money home every month because my mother had asked me to, and because I had never once in my life said no to her when she needed something. 3 years of that. 3 years of 12-hour days that smelled like antiseptic and metal, and the particular kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones so deeply you forget what rested feels like. My mother died in February. I found out by text. Not from my brother. From her neighbor, a woman named Dot, who had watered her plants on Sundays and apparently felt that someone should tell me in a timely fashion, unlike the people who actually shared my last name. The funeral had already happened by the time I got the text. 3 days earlier, I drove from Tulsa to Crestfield, Ohio in one stretch. 11 hours. Stopped for gas twice and coffee once and didn't cry until somewhere outside of Indianapolis when a song she used to hum while washing dishes came on the radio and I had to pull into a rest stop and sit there with my hazards blinking for 20 minutes before I could see the road again. The house on Aldrich Street looked the same from the outside. White siding, black shutters, the azalea bushes she had planted the year I was born and never once let anyone trim back too severely. The porch light was on. My brother's truck sat in the driveway, along with a second car I didn't recognize, something newer, expensive. The kind of thing with a hood ornament that announces before you're close enough to read the badge. I knocked, which felt absurd, knocking on the door I had walked through without thinking for the first 22 years of my life. But I knocked. My brother answered, Brennan. 4 years older than me, and in the seconds after the door opened, his face did something I have thought about many times since. It moved through recognition, through something that could have been guilt, and landed on a cool, practiced composure that told me the guilt had already been filed away somewhere it wouldn't cause problems. June. You made it. I made it, I said. Sorry about the drive. There was traffic due Columbus. He stepped back, not wide, just enough. Inside, the living room had been rearranged. The couch I grew up on was gone. The furniture was different, newer, coordinated in a way my mother never cared about because she was more interested in comfortable than curated. A woman I didn't know sat in the chair by the window, glass of wine in hand. She looked at me with the specific patience of someone who has already been briefed on a situation and decided it doesn't concern her. This is my wife, Brennan said. Serena smiled. It was the kind of smile that stays close to the mouth. I didn't know you had gotten married, I said. We didn't do a big thing, Brennan said. Last spring. I had been sending money home last spring. Money that presumably arrived at this house was opened by my brother and contributed to a household that now included a wife I had never met and furniture I had never seen. Mom never mentioned it. She was getting sick by then. He shrugged. You know how she was about phones. She texted, I said. He turned toward the kitchen. You want coffee? It wasn't a question. He was already moving. I stood in the hallway for a moment looking at the walls. Her photos were still there at least. Me at 8 in a Halloween costume. Brennan at his high school graduation. A family portrait from the year before my father left when we still did things like family portraits. I touched the edge of the frame and then followed my brother into the kitchen. We sat across from each other at the table she had bought at an estate sale when I was 12, the one with the uneven leg she had fixed herself with a folded piece of cardboard that had been there so long we both stopped noticing it. She left a will, Brennan said. He set a mug in front of me without asking how I took it. I've already spoken to the attorney. I waited. The house goes to me, he said. She updated it about 18 months ago. I looked at the mug. There's a storage unit, he said. Out on Route 9. She left that to you. I let the silence sit there for a second. A storage unit. Brennan, I sent her nearly $1,400 a month for 3 years. I know. That's over $50,000. I know, June. His voice was even, almost gentle, which was worse than if he'd been defensive. She needed it. Things were tight. I looked around the kitchen. At the new appliances. The backsplash tile that had not been there 3 years ago. Things look less tight now, I said. He set his mug down. Look, I know this isn't what you expected, but she made her choices. She wanted the house to stay in one piece, not get split down the middle. And I was here. I was the one who drove her to chemo, who handled the utilities, who dealt with everything while you were in Tulsa. I was in Tulsa sending money so you could afford to be here. He exhaled. That's not how she saw it. The woman from the living room, Serena, drifted into the kitchen doorway. She didn't say anything. She was just there, refilling her glass, existing in a house that had been in my family for 30 years in the way that someone exists, when they already know the outcome of a conversation. I think you should probably look at the storage unit before you decide how you feel about all of this, Brennan said. What's in it? He shrugged. I haven't opened it. She specifically said it was yours. Specifically, I repeated. He pushed a key across the table. Small, silver, a paper tag looped through it in my mother's handwriting. June, it said. Her cursive, the particular way she made a capital J that curved back on itself like a question. I picked it up. I need somewhere to stay tonight, I said. The guest room's being used for storage right now, Brennan said. We're in the middle of reorganizing. There's a Holiday Inn off the interstate, about 6 miles. I looked at him for a long moment. He didn't look away. He didn't look guilty. He looked like a man who had already decided, weeks or months ago, where the lines were and had arranged himself comfortably behind them. I picked up the key, left the coffee untouched, and walked back out through the door I had knocked on. The storage facility on Route 9 was the kind of place that closes at 8 and opens at 6 and smells like rust and climate control and the accumulated private lives of people who ran out of room or ran out of time. The code my brother had written on the paper tag opened the gate. Unit 14C was in the second row, a standard 10 by 10 with a corrugated steel door. I stood in front of it for a full minute before I used the key. The night was cold, dry for February, the sky a flat dark without stars. I had been awake for almost 20 hours. My hands were steady, which I attributed to the surgical tech training and not to any particular personal strength. The lock opened. I lifted the door. My flashlight swept across the interior and I stood there, not moving for a long time. It was organized. That was the first thing. Not crammed, not chaotic, not the disorganized overflow of a woman who hoarded or forgot things. It was arranged with deliberate care. Labeled boxes along the walls. A card table in the center with a single envelope on top of it weighted down with a small glass paperweight I recognized. A blue swirl. Something she had kept on her desk for as long as I could remember. My name was on the envelope. I walked to the table and picked it up. The paper was her stationery, cream-colored, the kind she ordered from a catalog every Christmas. I opened it carefully, as if the paper itself needed to be preserved. June, she had written, if you're reading this, I've done a poor job of something I should have handled face to face, and I am sorry for that. I was never good at the hard conversations. You know this. You've known it since you were 10 years old and had to be the one to tell your father that the dog had gotten out and made it to the Hendersons' yard because I couldn't figure out how to start that sentence. I almost smiled. I need you to understand something before you open anything else in this unit. I knew what you were giving up to send me that money. I knew it was more than you could afford. I tried to tell you to stop, more than once, and you wouldn't because you were the most stubborn person I have ever loved, and I love you for it more than I can explain. I knew about the house. I knew Brennan was expecting it. I let him expect it because he was present in a way that made him feel entitled, and I was tired, and it was easier. I am not proud of that. But what I left you is not a storage unit. What I left you is what I've been building since your father left, and I realized that the only person I could depend on to protect this family in the long run was myself. My throat had tightened somewhere in the second paragraph. Now it felt like something had its hands around it. The boxes along the left wall are financial records going back 22 years. The boxes on the right are property documents. There is a binder on the second shelf, green cover, that contains the information you need to start. I have a trust, June. Not the house, not the furniture. Nothing your brother can see or touch or claim he helped maintain. It took me 18 years to build it quietly and carefully, and I built it for you because I always knew you were the one who would know what to do with something that required patience. I lowered the letter. My hands were not entirely steady anymore. I found the green binder on the second shelf. I sat down on the concrete floor back against the shelves and read it for 2 hours. My mother had been a bookkeeper for a regional insurance office for 26 years. She had never made a lot of money, but she had also never spent money carelessly, and for 18 years, quietly, without telling anyone, she had contributed to a series of financial instruments that most people her age either didn't know about or didn't have the discipline to maintain. Not lottery-winning numbers. Not a sum that rewrote physics. But real. Meaningful. Enough to change the terms of a life. There were also property records I hadn't known about. A small parcel of land in her name, outside town, that had appreciated significantly over the past decade as the county expanded. She had never built on it, never sold it, never mentioned it at Thanksgiving. A separate folder, tucked at the back of the binder, was labeled with my brother's name and the word "Notes" in her handwriting. I opened it slowly. What was inside was not accusations. It was observation, dates and amounts, money she had lent him over the years, carefully documented, most of it unreturned. Conversations she had written down afterward, the kind you write down when you sense you might need to remember them accurately. A note about a conversation from 8 months before she died, during which he had asked her to update the will. And she had described his tone as impatient in a way that frightened me a little. Her words, not mine. I closed the folder and held it against my chest in the cold air of the storage unit and did not make any decisions that night. That is something I had to learn, not naturally but through necessity. Decisions made in the dark, when you're exhausted and hurt and angry, tend to look like what they are when the light comes back. I drove to the Holiday Inn. I slept for 9 hours. I woke up and ate a breakfast I tasted nothing of, and then I drove back to the unit and I started making a list. 2 weeks later, I met with an attorney named Howard Finch, a probate specialist who had been recommended to me by my mother's former colleague, a woman who had worked alongside her for 14 years and who had known, apparently, more than I had realized. She thought the world of you, the colleague told me when I called. She used to say you were the one who paid attention. I thought about that on the drive to Finch's office. The way my mother had watched things, quietly, without reacting. The way she had sat through dinners and holidays and family friction and never said much, just observed, just noted, just kept records in a careful hand. I was more her daughter than I had understood. Finch reviewed the documents. His eyebrows moved through several positions before settling into professional neutrality. His assistant brought me a glass of water without being asked. "This is carefully constructed," he said. "My mother was a bookkeeper," I said. "I can see that." He turned a page. She was also anticipating a challenge, from my brother. He looked at me over the top of his glasses, from someone who might feel entitled to contest the distribution. My brother had already made one move, though he didn't know I knew about it yet. He had reached out to Finch's office 2 days after the funeral to inquire about the estate timeline. Finch had not responded to that inquiry with any information, because Finch was already in possession of my mother's full documentation, which she had deposited with him personally in the fall, because she was a woman who understood that timing and paperwork are the same thing. I learned that from her too, just later than I should have. The process was slow. I want to be honest about that. It was not cinematic. It was emails and certified mail and phone calls I stepped outside to take, and documents I reviewed at the kitchen table of the extended stay apartment I had moved into, 2 miles from the storage unit, in a town I had grown up in and left, and now moved back to in circumstances I had not foreseen. Brennan called me twice during that period. The first time was polite. He wanted to know if I had looked at the storage unit and whether I needed help sorting through anything. I told him I had it handled. The second call was less polite. He had apparently received a letter from Finch's office requesting financial disclosures related to the estate. His voice had a quality in it that I recognized from childhood, from arguments at the kitchen table, the controlled tightness of someone who believes they are the wronged party and are struggling to maintain the frame. "What exactly are you doing, June?" "Reviewing Mom's estate," I said. "Like she asked me to." "There's nothing to review. She left you the unit." "She left me quite a bit more than the unit," I said. "It turned out she was a very organized woman." A long pause. "You're making this into something it doesn't need to be." "I think it already is something," I said. "I have a family, June. Serena and I are trying to start a life here." "I know. I hope you do." "Then drop this." "I can't," I said, "and I don't think you'd really want me to either, Brennan. I think if the situation were reversed, you'd do exactly what I'm doing. You'd want what was meant for you." "I want what was meant for me." He hung up. It was spring by the time things reached a point that required Brennan's direct presence. Not dramatic legal proceedings, not a courtroom. A meeting at Finch's office. Calm, professional, the kind of encounter that is devastating precisely because it is mundane. Numbers on paper. Documentation. The unambiguous arithmetic of a woman who had kept careful records for decades. I arrived early. I wore the same kind of thing I'd worn to work for 3 years. Quiet, functional, unremarkable, not trying to signal anything, not performing a role. Brennan arrived with Serena. She sat slightly behind him, the way she had stood in the kitchen doorway. Present but positioned, Finch walked through the documentation, the trust assets, the property, the full accounting of the money I had sent over 3 years, cross-referenced against household expenses, against the upgrades to the house, against the timeline of Brennan's financial requests and her records of them. Serena's expression did not change much. She had the particular stillness of someone absorbing information they had suspected but hadn't seen confirmed. Brennan's changed. Slowly. The composure he'd opened the door with, the same composure I had watched him wear through every uncomfortable thing since we were kids. It started to develop cracks along the edges. Not dramatic, just stress lines. "This was her money to allocate as she chose," Finch said when he had finished. "The documentation is clear. If you'd like to retain separate counsel to review the instruments, that's your right. But I'd want to be straightforward with you about where the burden of proof would sit." Brennan looked at me. I held his gaze. I had practiced keeping my expression neutral, not cold, just factual, because cold signals triumph, and I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in accuracy. "Why did you come back?" he said. His voice was different now, quieter. "Because she was my mother too," I said. "Because I spent 3 years working for this family, and I think she wanted me to know that she saw it, even if she didn't say it the way she should have. And because she asked me to." He didn't say anything for a long time. Finch cleared his throat. "We can schedule a follow-up to review the specific terms in more detail." The meeting ended without fireworks, without shouting, without anyone throwing anything. That surprised some people when I told them about it later. They wanted a scene, but what I had watched in that conference room was not the collapse of a bad person. It was the collapse of a story. Brennan had built his understanding of our family around a particular narrative, one where he was the responsible one, the present one, the one who deserved what remained. He'd told himself that story long enough that it had become infrastructure. Watching Finch dismantle it was not satisfying. It was just sad. The way most things are when you see them clearly. He called me 3 weeks later, not to negotiate, not to contest. He called me on a Sunday morning when I was in the storage unit still sorting, and his voice sounded like someone who had put something down and was not sure what to do with his hands. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said. "I know that probably doesn't cover much." "It doesn't," I said, "but I hear you. I didn't know about the trust." He paused. "I thought I knew the whole picture." Nobody ever knows the whole picture, I said. Mom knew that better than anyone. A long silence. She talked about you all the time, he said. The last year, when she was really sick, she always said you were the one who paid attention. I used to think that was a criticism of me. I think I was wrong about what she meant. I sat down on the concrete floor, same spot as the night I had found the letter. The units around me were quiet. Somewhere outside, a car moved slowly through the lot. What do you want, Brennan? I said. Not bitterly, genuinely. I don't know, he exhaled. I think I want to not have wasted the last year being the kind of person she would have been disappointed by. That's not nothing, I said. That's actually a reasonable place to start. We did not become close overnight. I want to be precise about that because the story of two siblings who reconcile perfectly after a painful inheritance dispute is not the story I have. What we became was more like two people who stopped being enemies and started being cautious and honest with each other, which is its own kind of progress. He helped me with the property paperwork twice when his expertise in contracting was relevant. I didn't ask him to, he offered. I accepted without making a thing of it. By summer, I had left the extended stay and moved into a small rental house 2 streets from where I had grown up. I was working again at the county hospital, closer to the kind of schedule a human being can sustain. I had kept the storage unit rented for 3 more months, not because I still needed it, but because I wasn't ready to close it yet. The last time I went, I brought the paperweight. The blue swirl. I had been keeping it on my kitchen windowsill, where the light hit it in the morning, the same way the light had hit it on her desk every morning of my childhood. I brought it that day and held it for a while, in that 10 by 10 room where she had left me everything she had been quietly building for 20 years. She had not given me the house. She had given me something she believed would last longer. A foundation made of patience and documentation and the understanding that the people who keep records in the dark are the ones who survive what comes into the light. I put the paperweight in my bag, I rolled down the door, clicked the lock, and drove home in the direction of a life that was finally starting to feel, in some not yet articulable way, like mine. If this story stayed with you, if something in it reminded you of your own family, your own questions about what people leave behind and why, I hope you'll take a moment to share it. And if you want to keep hearing stories about the quiet kinds of courage that don't make headlines but change everything, subscribe. I'll be here. People always want to know if I regret how long it took. 3 years in Tulsa. 3 years of double shifts in a studio apartment and wire transfers I couldn't really afford but sent anyway because she asked me to, and I didn't know how to say no to her. People hear that and they want me to say I was foolish, that I was taken advantage of, that I should have seen it coming. I don't see it that way. What I did in those 3 years was build something in myself that couldn't have been built any other way. Discipline doesn't come from ease. Patience doesn't come from situations that reward you immediately. I learned how to keep going when nothing was being handed back to me, and that is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the only thing that made me capable of handling what came after. My mother understood that. She watched me from a distance for years and she saw it even when I couldn't. The note she left wasn't just about money or property. It was her telling me, in the most concrete language she knew, that she had been paying attention, that the choices I made in the dark, when no one was watching and there was no audience and no reward, those choices were visible to someone who loved me. They always are. That's the thing about integrity. It is not invisible. It just takes a particular kind of person to see it. Brennan is not a villain in the version of this story I carry now. He made choices that came from fear and entitlement and a need to be the one who mattered most. I understand that. I grew up in the same house. I know how those feelings form, but he also made those choices, and choices have consequences that are not punishment, just physics. You build a life on a story that isn't true. Eventually, the story stops holding weight. That's what I watched happen in Finch's office. Not a defeat, a correction. The hardest part of this whole thing wasn't the legal process or the loneliness of those months and the extended stay or even the silence of the storage unit at night. The hardest part was not becoming bitter. Bitterness is seductive when you've been overlooked. It offers a clean explanation for everything, A story where you're entirely right and the other person is entirely wrong and you never have to sit with anything complicated. I had to make a daily decision, sometimes an hourly one, to put that down, to stay curious instead of certain, to stay focused on what I was building instead of what had been taken. My mother left me a foundation made of patience and documentation and quiet, sustained effort. The most honest tribute I can pay her is to use it the same way she built it, carefully, without fanfare, with my eyes open. June Harker is my name, and the most important thing I ever learned about strength is that it almost never looks like what you expect. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up at a storage unit at 11 o'clock at night, reads a letter in the cold, and decides to keep going anyway.